Let's dive deeper on shares of Nvidia. Of course, lower, as Don was pointing out, only by about 2 or 3%, 1.6%, in fact, in the pre-market. Following their earnings last night, Ben Reitzes, the Melius head of technology research, who just raised his price target, joins us now. Very good morning to you, Ben. Thanks for joining us. Headline, quick snapshot on these numbers.
Well, I thought they were very solid. I think that the reason the shares are trading a little lower is that they didn't include China in their guide, and that, some people were hoping there was some China sales in there, maybe a little firmer stance that China sales could get going. And then the sales of their new Blackwell chip were actually a little below what some folks estimated, because it takes time to ramp that product. But their guidance was really solid. The core growth outside of China is just really good, mid-teens growth. And then there should be more great growth in the fourth quarter. So I think we're all systems go. And then one final thing, Will, they did mention on the call a very huge TAM, total addressable market, by the end of the decade. This is something we've been calling for. That really implies revenue by the end of the decade, if they grow along with the industry, to be over $600 billion, which is just a huge number, which means the stock can even double from here, if not more. So we're pretty excited about the results, although we understand why it probably taking a breather. But we're not a day trader here.
I'm really interested in touching on that TAM point. And it comes back to another question I had, which is, at the moment, the scale of concentration of their customer base, which, they don't break out who is who, but we were discussing this earlier with Christina, 44% of the data center chip sales were two customers, probably Google and Microsoft. Can the TAM really grow to be that big based on the advantage that those 2 or 3 customers are going to have building their own products over the next couple of years? If they're the only ones grabbing these chips in large numbers, do you think that, in fact, the TAM's going to be a lot smaller because there's only going to be 2 or 3 buyers in a few years, because those hyperscalers' competition is going to evaporate if they can't compete and get their hands on the chips in the short term?
Yeah, well, it is something we grapple with quite a bit, the customer concentration, and being like half the sales being 4 or 5 customers. But the worst thing that would happen is if one broke away and won. So if one company were running away with AI, and then maybe one company would be able to hoard all the spending and whatnot. But it doesn't look like that right now. There's very healthy competition among the top 4, and then others. OpenAI is there, as well as a few other mega startups that really aren't startups. They're actually almost hyperscalers themselves. And then there's the notion about sovereign AI, where you see these huge Middle Eastern and European economies needing to invest in their own infrastructure due to not only national interest in their economies, but national security. So I see it being very big. I don't want one company to run away with the thing so that they hoard all the spending. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be like that right now. So that's a good thing. And customer concentration hopefully actually broadens over time with the sovereigns and some of these emerging companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and others that are going to be well capitalized for a long time. A lot of folks, if these companies IPO'd, there'd be a line down Wall Street to invest. So, I think we're going to be okay. But yes, it is something we monitor quite a bit.
Ben, what do you think NVIDIA's future looks like in China? I ask because they said on the call that the Trump administration still has yet to codify the 15% of sales that they have for some of those chips that are purchased by China. Beijing has encouraged a move away from U.S. technology and AI systems. So, how do you see that all playing out?
Well, there's probably in the stock a little bit of optimism around China still, and the stock ran up on that. But it's not in anybody's models mostly, or it's in some folks' models for the next few years. But most of the street doesn't have it in there. And so the risk you have in not owning the stock is that street numbers go up over 15% over the next few months if things calm down. Now, that being said, most of the numbers on the street are going to reflect everything outside of China, which is still very robust. And so with regard to China itself, it does seem like there's tensions a little bit like on both sides, where There, right now, it does feel like a lot of this, for the H20 at least, is in the CCP's court, where there was some reaction to some comments and whatnot that, they were going to be using some of the lower end chips, and whether they want China to, and the companies there to be buying the lower end chips after someone said something about it, et cetera. And I just think that the two countries will work this out. I think that there's likely a trade deal coming. And this will work itself out. I think President Trump is very commercial regarding Jensen's views that the world needs an American stack that can dominate the AI world, not just the United States, and that it's international interest actually to do so, so that the Chinese don't create a Chinese software stack that runs AI that they can export to our allies. So I think it will get worked out. I'm not sure if it's by the fourth quarter or some point next year, but we're optimistic that it happens. And we know there's some hawks in the Trump administration, but it does seem like President Trump is working with Jensen actually commercially on this. I just hope the two countries work it out, and we can see it kind of materialize at least by the fourth quarter, because then that's another positive.
Ben, here's just maybe it's philosophical, maybe it's technical. The idea that Nvidia sells into China and that somehow pushes Huawei out, I accept that it would push out their market share. The question is the mother of invention. Do you not believe that Huawei and some of these other chip makers will ever be able to catch up, and that therefore the incentive won't be there for them to do such a thing, nor that the Chinese government would want to almost incentivize them to do such a thing? That's the question about this sort of central issue around whether we should be selling in or not to China, and whether we actually, if we do, we somehow push them out.
Andrew, the world of AI is about developers. And the reason we, a few years ago recommended Nvidia, and what we saw, or at least what we think, is that they have the most developers developing AI applications on their platform. You win the developers, you win the race, okay? Apple won the mobile race in terms of profitability, not because of market share, but because they had the best app store that monetized application developers' ideas. In a way, NVIDIA's like that. They have the best ecosystem where you will monetize your AI applications if you use an NVIDIA stack, period, full stop. You win that, you win the race. And, Huawei and Chinese companies probably don't have the same advantage that NVIDIA has. And these little decisions NVIDIA made maybe years ago turn out to be huge outcomes later in a natural market environment. And we would like to see that proceed. And I think Jensen is advocating that the world running on an NVIDIA stack is a safer place. China's developers, while they could get pressure from their government to do a certain thing and try to use something else, if the NVIDIA stack monetizes AI, they will use it. And that's what we're risking here. Would you rather have NVIDIA control the AI stack globally, or somebody that may not be on our team? And I think that that's the question here.
In the last 20 seconds, just sum it up. What's your price target?
Price target 240, and we'd be buyers on weakness, and think they're on track. The sequential growth shows that there's probably not much to worry about here.